Well, good morning, everybody. It's Wednesday, the 8th of April, day 13 of our lockdown. To think about it, tomorrow marks 2 weeks of lockdown. Tomorrow is um, exactly two-thirds of the lockdown that we've gone through. And I find that quite amazing as well. And we look at the days that we on, and it's for me, it's been quite amazing just to see what God has been doing in the lives of so many people. And I wanted to share this morning with something that Barry kind of picked up on yesterday was just living this double-edged lifestyle. One week we're in church, we're praising God, and then we live as soon as we walk out the door, we kind of keep doing our own thing, and this it simply gets to the point where we can't keep doing that. And when I think about somebody that lived a blameless life, lived a life of integrity, my first thoughts often go straight to somebody like Job. And I just wanted to quickly pick up, and I love the story of Job, especially the first sort of two chapters. And we just see, like, here's a man that's got this great wealth that God has blessed him with. Here's this man that it doesn't matter what his children have done, that he goes out and he offers sacrifices on their behalf, just in case they've done something to offend the Lord. And we come to this account, and I just want to pick up on this quickly and then a few other thoughts. And so let's read quickly from Job 1, reading from verse 6. One day, the members of the heavenly court came to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser Satan came with them. Where have you come from? The Lord asked Satan. Now I find that amazing, just that God says to Satan, where have you come from? Was this a setting up for Satan, or I mean for God to kind of prove a point? But I mean that's a whole nother side thought. But I love that the God asked Satan, where were you? When we know that God is all knowing. So Satan answered the Lord, I've been patrolling the earth, watching everything that's going on. Then the Lord asked Satan, have you noticed my servant Job? He is the finest man in all the earth. He is blameless, a man of complete integrity. He fears God and stays away from evil. Um, and so we know then Satan kind of comes back and he responds like he only fears you and he only loves you because you have blessed him with all this stuff. And then God says, okay, well, that's fine. You can do whatever you want, but don't harm a hair on Job. And so Satan goes, and we see how Satan takes everything away. And people are telling Job, curse God. God is not, you're not in favor with God anymore, and all this kind of stuff. And Job gets to the point where he says, in verse 20, I came naked from my mother's womb, and naked when I leave. The Lord gave me what I have, and the Lord has taken it away. Praise the name of the Lord. And all of this, Job did not sin by blaming God. And then we see chapter 2 comes around, and we see another similar incident where God's having this meeting with the angels in heaven, and Satan comes along, and God says, where have you been? And he says, hey, I've been patrolling the world. And he says, hey, check Job. Job's the man. Job kind of he still loves me, he still worships me, he's still doing all this kind of stuff. And it got me thinking, we often kind of think about that. And I know for me, growing up playing rugby and even now like fishing and all that kind of stuff, there's nothing better than when you get recognition from somebody that you love, somebody that you respect, somebody that you hold dear, somebody that you almost consider a guru, maybe if it's in a sport or something like that. So for me, it was always when somebody would say, and I've been fishing with guys, and they say like, and I know they've made like SA teams and that kind of stuff, and say, wow, you fish really, really well. That's like almost that pat in the back, that kind of keeps you going. Now, I'm not saying for one moment that we've got to be running around looking for little pats in the back or anything like that, but it just does something when people say something about us, or when people say, hey, maybe standing around the bar, like, have you seen what so and so did? They were really, really good. That's amazing. We talk about our rugby players like that often. We talk about our football players like that often. That, hey, do you see what so and so did in the game on the weekend? And it got me thinking, here God is bragging about Job. And it got me thinking, does God brag about me and about the way that I live my life? And so it got me thinking as well that God allowed this calamity, this destruction to come upon Job. To actually say that, hey, listen, you can take everything away from Job. To the point where God gave Satan permission to even physically harm Job but not kill him. And in everything, Job kept blessing and praising the name of God. And it got me thinking that, are we like that? When trouble and calamity come our way, are we at the point where we're going, actually, God, how can I praise you through this? How can I glorify you through this? Or do we get to the point saying, woe is me, poor me, life is so tough, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. And that for me comes down to living that lifestyle, that continual lifestyle that we need to live based on the gospel, based on the fact that Christ came and died for us. And because of that, Christ restored our relationship with God the Father. Sorry, excuse me. So I wanted to pick up as well on something in the New Testament, something from the book of Hebrews that really got me thinking this morning about just how do we live our lives, and why do we want to live our lives in a certain way. And so we all know the verse from Revelation that speaks about don't be lukewarm or hot, rather be hot or cold, don't be lukewarm, because if you're lukewarm, God will spit you out. And it really got me thinking, like, let's take something like Coke, for example. There's nothing worse than lukewarm Coca-Cola. It needs to be cold. That's the best way to drink it. And, how are we living our lives? Are we living our lives that some people refer to as C&E Christians, as Christmas and Easter Christians? Or are we living a life that we fully sold out for Jesus, that we fully sold out for the gospel, that when people look at us, they see Christ living in us, that when we get up in the morning, Satan's like, oh no, they've gotten up. What are they going to be doing today? How are they going to be sharing the gospel? How are they going to be living it out? St. Francis of Assisi the phrase was attributed to him, that at all times preach the gospel, and if necessary, use words. So you see, there's this definite living it out, it becoming part of who we are, part of our DNA, part of the very core of actually who we are, is how do we live out this gospel. And so in Hebrews 10, verse 26, it says the following: Dear friends, if we deliberately continue sinning after you've received knowledge of the truth, there's no longer any sacrifice that will cover these sins. Just listen to that again and just hear what it says. Dear friends, if we deliberately continue sinning after you have received knowledge of the truth, there's no longer any sacrifice that will cover these sins. So just after we receive the knowledge of the truth, and we keep living a life where we keep sinning, there's no longer any sacrifice that will cover these sins. And I thought that's quite an intense statement to make. But then the writer in Hebrews continues in verse 27, there's only the terrible expectation of God's judgment and the raging fire that will consume his enemies. For anyone who refuses to obey the law of Moses was put to death without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. Just think how much worse the punishment will be for those who trample on the Son of God, those who treat the blood of the covenant which made us holy as if it were common and unholy, and have insulted and disdained the Holy Spirit who brings God's mercy on us. And that got me thinking, how often do we quickly kind of just fall into that pattern going like, oh, God will forgive me, everybody else is doing it. But when we called out that we need to live this life above reproach. We need to live this life actually that we sold out for God. Why? Because the blood of Christ, the blood that made us holy, the blood that buys the new covenant for us, that paid for the redemption of our sins, is not a common thing. It's a holy thing. It's a special thing. And that should be causing us to live every single day as if it's a special day. Every single day is actually, how am I going to get up this morning and make a difference? And I wanted to leave us with that, is that this morning it might be a little bit dreary and it might be a little bit like doom and gloom, but think about that. As we come up into Easter, is this just going to be another time where we do what we've always done? Or is this going to be a time where we start living our lives sold out for Jesus? And we often maybe think to ourselves, but actually, I've made mistakes. I've got a history. We've all got a history. We've all got a past. We don't need to look anywhere further than somebody like King David. Somebody that God says, he has a man after my own heart. But yet King David was a murderer. King David was an adulterer. And we think God says he's a man after my own heart. And I love the story when the prophet Nathan comes to David, and he refers to the two sheep, the two men, and the one man has this little sheep that he really, really loves. And the rich guy comes and he takes a sheep to give to one of his own guests. And David's like, that man must pay. And when Nathan says, but that's you. This is what you did to Uzziah the Hittite. And David gets to the point where he falls on his knees and he confesses before God. Isn't it amazing that the God that we love, while he calls us to live what sometimes we think almost this impossible standard, loves us enough to have grace, that he never expects us to do it in our own strength. And that's what I want to challenge us this morning. When people look at you, are they going to see somebody that's living for God? Or are they just going to see somebody that just does the traditional thing every Christmas and Easter?